Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du, fa'uzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qala Allah ta'ala fil Qur'anil Hakim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت أحد عشر كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدوا لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين. Sadaqallahul Azim. I've recited two verses here from the beginning of chapter 12 of the Holy Quran entitled Yusuf, or in English Joseph, and I'll now read out the translation of what I recited and the following two verses as well. So this is as follows. When Joseph said to his father, "My father, I saw 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them making submission to me." And this making submission in Arabic is sajda. And the father said, "My son, do not relate your dream to your brothers in case they devise a plan against you. The devil indeed is an open enemy to man, and thus will your Lord choose you and teach you the interpretation of sayings, and make his favour complete to you and to the children of Jacob, Yaqub alaihi-s-salaam, as he made it complete before to your fathers Ibrahim and Ishaq. Surely your Lord is knowing, wise. Surely in Yusuf and his brothers there are signs for the inquirers. Now this chapter relates the story of this early prophet, Yusuf alaihi-s-salaam, Joseph, from his childhood to his attainment of a high position in both religious and worldly terms. And the last verse which I just quoted, which says that this story contains signs for the inquirers. This shows that this is not being related merely as a tale of history from the past, but it will answer our quest to find the right path. Joseph lived about 3,800 years ago. His father was Jacob or Yaqub alaihi-s-salaam. His grandfather was Isaac or Ishaq alaihi-s-salaam. And his great-grandfather was Ibrahim alaihi-s-salaam. Joseph, as a youth in his late teens, saw the dream which is mentioned here. I saw 11 stars in the sun and the moon making submission to me or making sajda to me. And this dream cannot, the prostration, the sajda in this dream, the submission, cannot be any literal prostration like our sajda in prayer, because these bodies, sun, moon, stars, they can't perform such an act. So this is something which must have been indicated to Joseph in a symbolic form, that these bodies are prostrating to him, prostrating before him. Now, if we look at modern developments in science and technology, we can see that these heavenly bodies mentioned here, they do in a sense submit to humans, in the sense that we can use them for our benefit, although of course we don't control them. We obtain solar energy from the sun. There are plans to extract minerals from the moon and from some other planets in our solar system in the future. And as regards stars, we can say that they submit to us in the sense that they yield knowledge to us about their history, how they work, how they continue, and how they will die. Recently, you will have heard that a space probe sent from Earth passed close to the Sun to make observations about the Sun. And it had been designed and built so that the Sun's great heat could not harm it as it passed close to the Sun. So in that sense, the Sun submitted to that probe which was sent by human beings. So perhaps in this dream, there is also a prophecy that these bodies, which in the dream submitted to Joseph, that they will submit to humanity in general in a physical sense. Now, as to this submitting to Joseph, this dream is generally taken and explained in the sense that by the sun and the moon are meant Joseph's parents, and by the stars are meant his 11 brothers. And what the dream means, submitting, sajda, is that Joseph was going to rise to such a high position chosen for him by Allah himself that they would be looking up to him and recognizing his achievements. They would, in fact, the parents and the brothers, become subject to his authority as they eventually did. However, soon after this dream, and as I read its interpretation by Joseph's father Jacob, some events took place which actually reduced Joseph to a very low and helpless position in society. Now, out of his 11 brothers, 10 were older than Joseph, and those 10 were all from the same mother. And after them was Joseph and his younger brother Benjamin, and these two were from another mother. And his father, Joseph's father Jacob, knew that the 10 older brothers, they were already jealous of Joseph, even without knowing about this dream. And in fact, to a certain extent, they were also jealous of the younger brother Benjamin. So that is why Hazrat Yaqub advised Yusuf not to tell the brothers about this dream, because they were already jealous and they might make some plan against him. But in any case, what happened was that one day the brothers took Joseph with them on the pretext of playing somewhere away from the home, and then under a plan which they had devised, they just left him at the bottom of a pit or a well. The well must have been empty of water at the time. They abandoned him there, and they returned home to the father, pretending to be crying, saying that Joseph has been eaten by an animal while we left him alone for a little while. But Jacob, Hazrat Yaqub, already knew from Allah that one day he would meet Joseph again. Now, as to Joseph, he was found by some travelers who were passing by, and they picked him up out of that pit or well, and they took him with them, and as treating him as property, they sold him in Egypt, in the next door country. So now Joseph was just a slave boy, and this prophecy about the sun and the moon and the stars prostrating to him just became unimaginable that something like that could happen. He was sold to a leading Egyptian official, and he became a domestic servant, knocker as we say, in his house. And the Holy Quran then says, and when he attained his maturity, we gave him wisdom and knowledge. And this is how we reward the doers of good. And this is chapter 22 in verse 22 of chapter 12. And incidentally, the verses which I recited at the beginning were verses 4 to 7 of the same chapter 12, Surah Yusuf. So in verse 22 of that chapter, Allah tells us this, that when Joseph attained his maturity, Allah gave him wisdom and knowledge. Now one day it so happened that when that official's wife and Joseph were alone in a room in the house, she bolted the door and attempted to seduce Joseph. But Joseph was a person of high moral caliber, and he rejected her advances, telling her that this was a wrong act to do. And the Holy Quran adds that it was actually Allah who turned Joseph's heart away from committing evil. And there is a great lesson to be learned from this. Those people who are our models, possessing wisdom and knowledge and doers of good, as it is stated here about Joseph, such people do not exploit any opportunity that presents itself in front of them to do wrong. Joseph didn't even need to go anywhere to do this, and he didn't create this situation himself. And this is completely the opposite of what you have been hearing in the news of these grooming scandals, in which unfortunately many Muslims of Pakistani origin are implicated. These criminals create the situation themselves for exploiting vulnerable females. And even to mention the name of this righteous Hazrat Yusuf in this connection is inappropriate and unjust, but the comparison needs to be made. And it must be said that Yusuf alaihi-s-salaam literally, physically ran away from an exploitative situation, while these grooming gangs seek to create such situations themselves and draw their unfortunate and helpless victims into those situations. The Holy Quran then relates, and I'll read it in a translation, it's a little lengthy. It says, and they raced with one another to the door, and she tore his shirt from behind, and they met her husband at the door. She said, on seeing her husband, what is the punishment for someone who intends evil to your wife, except imprisonment or a painful punishment? Joseph said, she sought to seduce me. And a witness of her own family bore witness, saying, if his shirt is torn in front, she speaks the truth, and he is a liar. And if his shirt is torn from behind, she is telling a lie, and he is truthful. And the Quran, I'm still quoting from the Holy Quran. So when the husband saw Joseph's shirt torn from behind, he said, surely this is an intrigue of you women. He said this to his wife. Your intrigue is indeed very great, very serious, very grievous. And he said to Joseph, turn away from this. And he said to his wife, ask forgiveness for your sin. Surely you are one of the sinful. Verses 25 to 29 of that chapter 12. So this brings us to another aspect of the matter. if such a situation occurs anywhere in the world, among Muslims or non-Muslims, a situation which has been described here, the husband and the relatives, especially the woman's relatives, would fall into a rage. They would beat up the man that she was accusing and may even kill him before asking any questions. And Joseph could have been subjected to this treatment because he was, after all, no more than a domestic servant in the household of an important official of the state. But here, in this incident, it was a relative of the woman who suggested that they should look for independent evidence instead of accepting the unconfirmed allegation made by the woman. And that independent evidence was provided not by a human being, but by the condition of Joseph's shirt. And when that evidence indicated that she was in the wrong, the husband declared the wife as sinful and told her to repent. And he asked Yusuf to just overlook the matter, as he was now cleared of that false charge. Now let us remember that these Egyptians were worshippers of several gods. And it was only Joseph who was a believer in the one God and devoted to God. And what the Quran here conveys to us is that even worshippers of idols, worshippers of the sun and the stars, can have high standards of justice. Clearly, here is another great lesson for us, that we should judge a matter by means of independent evidence and by the use of our rational thinking, rather than just believing what a person close to us, a friend or a relative, tells us, and then react emotionally because of our attachment to that friend or relative. React emotionally against someone. However, continuing with this story, unfortunately, justice for Joseph only went this far. That woman, to take revenge on Joseph, conspired against him with the help of some other women friends, who all belonged to the upper classes in Egypt. And he was sent to prison anyway. And the Holy Quran says that Joseph said to Allah, praying to Allah, "My Lord, the prison is dearer to me than the actions which they invite me to." Verse 33. So Joseph, Hazrat Yusuf, preferred to be in prison than to be outside, where his morality was at risk of being compromised. Joseph's position was now worse than ever. The fulfillment of the dream which he had, and the prophecy that the sun and moon and the 11 stars would be submitting to him, that fulfillment now looked completely impossible in prison. In prison, Joseph met two other prisoners, and both of those prisoners related to him their dreams about their future, in each case that person's future, and they asked him to interpret them. Joseph interpreted their dreams and told them of their meaning. But before telling them the meaning of the dreams, he preached to them. And he said this, and I again quote two verses from the Holy Quran in translation. He said to them, "Surely I have given up the religion of a people who do not believe in Allah and are deniers of the hereafter. And I follow the religion of my fathers Ibrahim and Ishaq and Yaqub. It does not befit us to set up any partner with Allah. O my two fellow prisoners, are different gods better, or just the one Allah, the Supreme? What you are worshipping besides Him are only names which you have named, you and your fathers. Allah has sent down no authority for them, Judgment is only Allah's. He has commanded you that you worship none but Him. That is the right religion, but most people do not know. These are verses 37 to 39. That was Joseph's mission, to preach that God is one. He puts fulfilling his mission before demonstrating to these two fellow prisoners his talent and ability in interpreting dreams. There are people among certain Muslim sects, or possibly one particular Muslim sect whose name I won't mention, who believe that they receive true dreams from Allah, and they claim that this proves their nearness to Allah, and it proves that their religious beliefs have been accepted by Allah because they have dreams which turn out to be true. Here the Holy Quran teaches us two lessons. Firstly, anyone can have a true dream about their future, including criminals serving sentences in prison. Anyone can have a true dream about their future. It doesn't mean that their religious beliefs are correct, or that Allah is setting the seal of His approval on their deeds. This phenomenon just exists in order to make people witness the fact that Allah communicates news of the future to individuals. So when a prophet, or you could also add a saint in Islam, claims to have received some news from God, it is an experience that the ordinary people have at least got some inkling of, and it is not something completely strange and novel to them. So that's one thing. Secondly, we see from this that the primary duty of a true leader of religion is to teach belief in Allah and to inform people about Allah's oneness, His tawheed, and His greatness, His azmat. And it is not his primary duty to impress people with his own powers and accomplishments. Now, what the dreams of these two prisoners were, and what happened later on in Joseph's story, I will, inshallah, God willing, cover in the next khutbah. And I may also add here that because Joseph's dream and other dreams in his story are mentioned also in the Bible, so you might have heard that there's been a musical which has been going on, I think, for several years, if not decades. It's still on again in theaters. Yusuf and the Amazing Technicolor Dream. So such well-known is his story and the dreams associated with it that it has been turned into a musical, obviously fictional, partly based on the Bible. So may Allah enable us to learn practical lessons from the hard and difficult experiences of the prophets as related in the Holy Quran, instead of merely reading them as stories of wonder and amazement. May Allah enable us to do that. Ameen. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quranil Azim wa nafa'na wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malikul barrur rahim.